Attention, please. This is very important topic. Burnout alert. How to keep your flame burning in post-pandemic reality. Aleksandra Błaszczyk, welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm happy to be here. Last time I spoke on JDD, it was online. So all the more, I'm glad that I could be here with you and that we can experience the conference together, even with the stage fright that I'm just having. All right, so it's been the second day already, so I'm curious, how are you today? All good? Great, good to hear. I have to tell you that I used to answer to this question, I'm fine, as you do when you're having a small talk. And I thought I also was fine on a day when I didn't get up to work. Funny thing was that at that time I was doing my dream job. I was a trainer in an international IT corporation. I was delivering trainings. I was very passionate about it. I was traveling the world. But at some point, it was very hard for me to admit that I wasn't entirely fine. Instead, I was feeling frustrated, insecure, neurotic, and exhausted. Is that familiar to any of you? Do you have this kind of emotional states from time to time? Good, means that you are human. Long story short, that day when I didn't go to work, started my 6 months sick leave when I went to treatment from depression. The diagnosis really struck me. I felt like a complete failure. I was ashamed of it, and I didn't know what to do and why actually I fell for mental illness. And one day at a treatment, at a group therapy, one person, my fellow patient, said to me, "Seems to me like your job is triggering what you're experiencing." And I was like, what is he saying? And I responded, "I love my job." And everybody started laughing, as you do now, because I said it in a robotic voice. And then it made me think that maybe there is something to it. Maybe it is because my job. And then, down the treatment, I was made realize that my depression was not just out of the blue, that it was a side effect of a chronic workplace stress, which is called burnout. And it was so severe, and my brain was already so damaged from stress and being overwhelmed with tasks and pressure, that it led me to this dead end of a depression. But this realization actually was a turning point in my treatment, because I thought, okay, this is not an illness that I cannot control. It's something with root causes that I can probably work on, I can eliminate. So I started healing pretty quickly from that moment. And then when I finished my treatment, I realized that in my environment, there are a lot of people who experience similar states. But cannot find a proper help on mental health services. They can either choose from between psychiatrists and psychotherapists, and not everyone has the guts, or not everyone believes in this kind of support. So I thought, why wouldn't I use my experience and my skills as a coach and a trainer and support people who go through burnout? And this is why I'm here today. I turned it into my professional mission to support people and organizations in combating burnout. You probably read my bio. If not, then there's this moment. And when it comes to today's talk, I'm going to talk about three major things when it comes to burnout. First of all, how does it feel? Then how do you get it? And how to deal with it when you already have it. If we have time, we'll go through some Q&As. Maybe you would have some. So, how does it feel? I already gave you a clue. So let's take a look at the definition from World Health Organization. They say that burnout is a syndrome that is caused by chronic workplace stress, and this stress was not successfully managed. Now, what is important to emphasize here is that this is a chronic stress. We as humans are evolutionarily prepared to fight big stressors, like life or death stressors, a tiger hunting you or some hostile tribe trying to get you. Then we are really good in dealing with such stressors. But with chronic stress, not so much. Chronic stress is like drops of water just dripping over your head over and over again. They do not kill you, they're not lethal, but at some point you just snap. And this is how also it works when it comes to burnout. Burnout became so common and so devastating for budgets and for economy that World Health Organization decided to include it into classification of diseases. It's valid from this year on. However, in Poland, it takes legislators to introduce it into our labor law 5 years. So you cannot get a sick leave for burnout yet. But definitely you can get it for accompanying diseases like depression, anxiety, behavioral disorder, and so on. When World Health Organization decided to include it, it was 2019, and their statistics were that this is every second person in the world. Now I think those statistics really grew, according to various researchers. And this is the result of a research from Blind. Have you heard of this community? Are you a part of it? No? Okay, this is quite an interesting place on the internet. They are like a social network, but without auto-promotion. So there are no photos, no selfies, nothing like that, but very to-the-point posts and articles. So they run this research on their community of IT developers and figured out that this is 7 out of 10 people who actually experience burnout nowadays. And now let me tell you how it feels, maybe in more detailed way. So first of all, emotional exhaustion and energy depletion. This is something you experience when you run out of energy. Basically, you feel tired from the early morning, or you run out of the energy early during the day. You have no emotional capacity for problems of other people. You become overly irritated, aggressive, everything just overwhelms you. And also, no matter how much work you have objectively, you feel like it's too much. Yeah? So it's hard for you to just bear reality. Another important symptom is being negative and cynical. And this is the attitude of being indifferent towards work, doing the bare minimum, not caring anymore for your work results, being sarcastic, complaining, basically a bit toxic to your surroundings. And the third group of symptoms is reduced professional efficacy, meaning that you just feel stupid because you have no access to your cognitive resources. You might have problems being creative, making decisions, doing the tasks that used to be very simple. Now it takes you more time, you have a hard time concentrating, and basically you feel like you don't deliver. And all the more you think that everybody can see this, and you fear of losing your job. And this is, it really feels like a dead end. The reason for all those states and conditions is that your mental energy runs out. Mental energy is not any magical term, it's an actual term that is related to your cognitive abilities, like thinking, analyzing, planning, making decisions, being creative, dreaming. So basically everything that makes us humans. And when your energy is down, your brain just focuses on survival, and it's not really not really keen on any creative processes. So could you tell me, did you ever experience this kind of state? I can see some show of hands. Okay. Sorry? Because you have exhausted yourself through fighting with all those stressors that you're having on a daily basis. And you went to some limits, yeah, of your capabilities, of your resources. We're going to talk about the reasons in a moment. I'm sorry? Oh yeah, this will be the third topic of our talk. So how does one get it? Do you have any ideas already? How can you actually fall with burnout? Too much work. Mm-hmm. What else? Spiraling of the thoughts. Yeah, good hint. So this is more like a result of being burned out, yeah, because you're so stressed that you cannot really relax, and your thoughts are whirling around problems. Okay, so how does one get it? Basically through the environment that happen to be toxic very often. And the general root cause for burnout is the mismatch between employee and the job. So something is not working, and it can not work on many levels. First of all, there is work overload. So just too much work. It could be either too many tasks, or too much stimulation. So it might happen that you are involved in many threads, you have to respond to people through different channels, you have to change context all the time, and your brain cannot process at some point. Then we have lack of control, which is classical micromanagement when you cannot really decide how you do your job. Then we have any kind of unfairness in the organization. It could be unfairness around budgets, where budget is not distributed fairly and transparently for salary rises, for bonuses, or other rewards. Or it could be related to managers' attention, for example, and it's not really, sometimes managers have their favorites, right? Then we have lack of reward. So basically you don't feel appreciated, you don't get a tap on your back, you don't get financially recognized properly, and you feel treated unfairly. Then we have values conflict, where your values do not match the values that the employer shows, and you just have a bad conscience working there, or you cannot accept the targets of the company, so you might become cynical. And the last one is community breakdown. Community breakdown used to be interpreted as a place that is toxic, where there is a lot of dirty politics, speculation, gossip, where you just cannot be yourself and trust people. It's still valid for burnout, but also what it was extended with is work in isolation. And nowadays, most of us, I suppose most of you have this experience of remote work, being separated from your teams, from your community. And people who work only on their own are more prone to burnout than people who meet other people on a regular basis. And now let me refer again to Blind and their research. So they studied burnout among IT and found out that these are the top 10 most burnout companies during pandemic. Any familiar names? Maybe your employers even. Basically, when I look at this this chart, I'm wondering how shareholders can sleep at night knowing that they do it to people. And these are the reasons this community indicated as reasons for burnout. So what reflected here from what I just said before was unmanageable workload, lack of control over work, lack of support from manager, but most of all, no separation between work and life. And this is what I wanted to elaborate a little bit more on. So I'm curious, how does work from home work for you? Do you enjoy it? Some yes, some just so-so. Okay. Well, there are different experiences, right? Some people have it like this. Their work looks like this, or at least feels like this. Anyone like this here? Okay, we have some lucky, I wouldn't say whom. But for some people it looks like this. They definitely practice work-life blending, and it's got blended so much that they don't know where they are anymore. Some people developed chronic back pain from bad posture, some Zoom fatigue and body dysmorphia for looking too much at themselves on the computer. And basically, I know that there is now a big discussion online and in many companies between employers and employees, yeah, and they try to figure out how to adapt to new work style again. Definitely we know what are the perks of remote work, right? There are a lot of savings, time, money, energy, also nerves, but also there are a lot of threats. And this is what I wanted to talk about a little bit more. So I think 3 situations would be worthwhile to discuss. First of all, if you're a young professional and you ended up at home office without any community, without people who you can ask questions to directly, who you can shadow at work, who you can learn from, then you might feel lost and alone. If you're at the beginning of your career, most likely you cannot afford a separate office at home, but you can, for example, have this office in your bedroom. It's also not very healthy for your mental hygiene. Another situation is that when we are working in the same environment, all alone or with a very limited group of people, our environment becomes socially sterile. And what it means, let's take, I don't know, if you're all the time in sterile environment, what happens to your immune system? I'm sorry? Starts attacking itself, yeah, in the worst case. Or at least goes on vacation, yeah, and doesn't defend you from microbes and from viruses anymore, because they're just not around and it snoozes. The same happens with your mental resilience. If you're avoiding social contact, there is no occasional laugh, chat, not even some inconvenient situations or conflicts, then you get unused to those situations and your social competence drops down. So when you go out again to see people, it might become difficult. You might feel anxious, insecure, not very spontaneous. It's hard for you to react naturally. That's why now there is such a peak of anxiety disorders and as well depression. So are you familiar with this kind of experience? I can see some nodding. I share that with you. I also realized at some point that being introvert is fun, but at some point you need to have a reflection in the eyes of other people to see if you're still there. So on one hand, we are social animals, and we need some people from time to time. And on a deeper level, we have a very deep and strong ancestry from reptiles. And here I want to ask you whether you've ever heard of sensory intelligence. No? Some did? Okay. Good. Very shortly, sensory intelligence is the part of our system that we share with reptiles. And this is about senses. Basically, it reads reality and the environment through senses and let us know whether we are in danger or not. So it's responsible for survival. It doesn't think, it only senses and reacts. And is much faster than our neocortex, the newest part of the brain. Our environment through pandemic changed drastically and very suddenly. All of a sudden, all the stimulation that we've had was cut off. And only two of our sides, hearing and sight, were bombarded with stimulation. The others, there was a big deprivation of new touches, smell, taste, movement. So this inner crocodile of ours actually was freaking out and was looking out for this danger that is there probably in this changed environment. But there was no physical danger, right? So this whole energy of survival actually kicked us back. And that's why you might have been depressed, anxious, cranky, or just angry, yeah? Because this energy had to go somewhere. And it's been proven in another research by Gallup Institute. I don't know if you can see from the distance. Basically, this is research that shows the difference in experiencing emotions between people who work on-site and remote. And especially disturbing are those numbers that show that people who work only remotely experience much stronger and more intense difficult emotions. So are you familiar with that? Okay, I have some nodding. Again, proves that you're human. At the same time, in the same research, there was an interesting observation that showed the preference of people and their preferred place to work during the course of pandemic. The research started in 2019, so pre-pandemic, where most people, like 60%, preferred working on site, compared to 8% who wanted to work remotely. And then, as you can see, this tendency changed up to now, when actually the winner is the hybrid work, where you sometimes spend at your place and sometime with people in the office. So what will be your preference? Do you prefer working on-site? Hybrid, okay. I have to tell you what I observe now in all those discussions and trends on the market is actually a revolution of a work style. The second revolution after the industrial one, which achievements already are quite outdated. And to me, when I read the arguments of an employer and employees, it's a discussion between two systems. Feudal system that was based on control and oppression, and entrepreneurial system where you actually rely on yourself and you are independent. And I believe that at some point it will shift towards a more convenient work style that would account employees as partners, not as human resources. Okay, very good in time. So now, you're curious how to deal with burnout. Maybe you already have your experience. Since you can share it, maybe you can tell us what you did. Once again? Year of gap year, you mean? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, career gap, good. Yeah. So this is also my first advice, basically taking a break. Now it depends on how deep your crisis is, because the one I had was really a deep shit crisis. So I had to take a break. But for some people it's like a medium crisis, or it's just, you know, showing the first symptoms. And you still have this cognitive abilities to think about your situation. So what I advise is to remodel the way you work, to see what are the biggest stressors, what gives you the biggest pressure, and think how to reorganize it for your well-being. If it's not enough, then a break, and a longer break than 2 weeks of vacation, should do. Now, there's often a question, how long should this break be? It really depends. We're all different. We have different mental resilience, different resources. So I would say it's very individual, but definitely 2 weeks or a month is not really enough. Then what is important is to implement some so-called radical self-care. Probably you've heard that you have to sleep well, eat well, educate, do sports, and socialize. Sounds trivial, but really nothing else was invented yet for us to support our mental hygiene and well-being. You cannot fight burnout in the instant. There is no such a recipe, especially that usually you work for it pretty long. So when it comes to sleeping, I need to comment on it a little bit more. Because when you're burnout, your sleeping routine is disturbed and your brain cannot really fall deeply asleep. It means that you sleep, you take just shallow naps, anything can wake you up, or you wake up very early in the morning and you cannot fall back asleep. And you need time for your brain to retrain to sleep well again. So for my clients who have this sleeping disorder, I advise to sleep as much as they need and whenever they need. Sometimes it's dozen or more hours per day, and it's okay because your brain just needs to rest. It needs to clean the cortisol from your system. Then having some alone time also might be beneficial. Just, you know, to rest, to relax, to get bored, and again, not give your brain any special stimulation. Recreation, obviously, so any kind of movement, some sport that is not a challenge and not an achievement, being in the nature, breathing, experiencing with all the senses, just, you know, satisfying your inner crocodile, also brings back a lot of balance to our system. Then, obviously, connections. And when it comes to relationships that are, you know, relationships with people you can trust, that are kind to you, that would not judge you, and are not financially dependent on you, this is the first place to go when you're having this kind of trouble. Basically, it's, they say that natural support is like a first mental help. And speaking of mental help, if this is not enough, if you didn't recharge and you still have anxiety and mood disorders and you fear of going back to work, it's really important to search for professional help and to use psychological first aid. You can do it with a therapist, with sometimes even with your doctor, with a physician, or with a crisis coach. Many people ask me here whether burnout requires therapy. And I say that it depends, because if you're in real trouble, like you cannot really get out of bed and you feel like your life is over, then you need a psychologist. But if it's like milder crisis, then I wouldn't recommend this kind of help, because psychiatrists would make you dig even deeper in this crisis. In such situations, a crisis coach or a good experienced HR person is a good address. Then what is important are boundaries. After you recover from burnout, most likely you realize what went wrong, what kind of boundaries were crossed, where you got abused or let others abuse you. And with this kind of knowledge, with this perspective, it's important to sit down and talk with your employer, with your manager, discuss what doesn't work anymore, how do you want what changes do you want to introduce, and basically protect yourself from getting into this burnout spiral again. And talking of falling into it again, I have to tell you, my clients who come to me usually say that this happened to them already a third time, and they realized some pattern and thought maybe it's worthwhile to do something about it. So you cannot really get immune from burnout if you had it once. Then when it comes to sensory intelligence, it's really important not to forget about it. And this is an argument a little bit against remote work, because we are not just head and shoulders on Zoom screen. We have also our whole bodies that take part in the communication and in the conversation without our conscious brain knowing it. We're basically animals that need to sniff one another to see if they can trust one another and if they can build relationships. So especially when you have some important deal to discuss, when you negotiate a project, or you want to see whether this business discussion you're taking really takes you somewhere, it's good to meet in person. Then you really want to be at the table with the other person to see if your nervous systems can synchronize and what can you actually gain from it. Need some water. Okay. So when you get back to work, again, it's important to have some self-reflection and see what style works best for you. Probably there are times and days or moments of the week where you need to meet other people for brainstorming, for team meeting, for increasing your energy level. Maybe you have some motivation problems down the week. So it's good then to, put your shoes on and go out to see people. But there are probably times when you need to work in concentration and you need some quieter space. And then working from home could be convenient. Another piece of advice when it comes to the time of technology is to work offline and work asynchronically. Basically, again, evolution comes into play. It's not as fast as civilization, and it didn't equip us in communicating with multiple people at the same time, especially if they demand from us something appearing as those red bubbles on your screen. And this is also the reason why you can have just one conversation at a time on your phone. And it's good just to, cut off once in a while. Probably there are some tasks where you don't have to be online and on Slack all the time, and you can just either mute those notifications or turn them off to focus. And this deep focus, called also deep work, is again very important for your brain and fighting chronic stress. And obviously, last but not least, it's important to have a purpose, because if you don't, then you get cynical. And you stop caring about what you do and you feel like you're wasting your time. So it's important, again, to think what is important for you at your work, what do you want to accomplish, what do you want to leave as a heritage, or what basically makes you happy, what you enjoy doing. And this would be like the last step in fighting burnout. But to do this, you have to be recharged and ready again to take up challenges. And hopefully then you'll be able to say that you are actually really fine. But meaning that you have fun, that you feel inspired, that you feel natural about what you do, how you operate, and that you feel invigorated. So guys, this is all from my side. Here's where you can find me. And we have 10 minutes for Q&A.